We're trying to talk to mayoral candidates to hear their answers on some of the different issues impacting Black people around the city of Boston. Um, this particular event is sponsored by different organizations such as Cotton Square Neighborhood Development Corporation, the Male Engagement Network, Union Minority Neighborhoods, List Boston. We have ABCD Mattapan. We also have Keeping Cotton Square Affordable, New Estra CDC, and there's more. We'll Sister Circle, a whole bunch of great folks that we'll list out at the end as well.
Men of color are disproportionately affected in our communities, especially in terms of gaining access to affordable housing. As mayor, how would you prioritize giving men of color greater access to affordable housing?
Again, building upon some of the work I've already done. And I'm going to, throughout this conversation, stress my record of accomplishment because I think it's important. And it sets me apart from every other candidate in this race in that I have a specific record of accomplishment on these issues. And the district I currently represent is predominantly a district of color with a high percentage of Black men and brown men, but Black men in my district. And so what have I done? My first piece of legislation on the council was a Community Preservation Act. That's generating $20 million a year, and a large percentage is going to affordable housing. I have directed those dollars to a lot of home ownership opportunities, particularly in communities with a large percentage of Black residents, but also where residents have a very low income threshold. And not pushing just for rental opportunities, home ownership opportunities using the CPA dollars. The second is I started the vacant lot initiative in the city of Boston. We are currently activating city-owned vacant lots for community need, but especially housing. Right now, there are 30 RFPs out along Blue Hill Ave. That is because of the work I, along with my team, have done over the years. And so pushing for these parcels to not only be used for homeownership opportunities, but also as a way to create jobs and economic stability, really looking at contractors and developers, smaller developers right in the community that could take on some of these bids in order to create more affordable housing, but also create more economic opportunity. The Boston Housing Authority, those buildings are often not even talked about. That's a lot, of course, there's a large percentage of where men of color live, but also where a lot of folks who have low income or no income live. I brought in a program into our housing authority that, as we sit on this Zoom, is moving people out of poverty and into home ownership opportunities. I would expand all of those efforts as mayor. I would expand the vacant lot initiative. I've already committed to, as mayor, literally activating 100 of those city-owned lots in my first 100 days. I would expand that housing program within the Boston Housing Authority. There is a long waiting list right now for that program. I would expand that quickly. And then I would just add financial literacy and building wealth also has to be a part of the conversation. I'm proud that my housing plan really does both. It creates not only more housing and addresses issues of displacement and gentrification, but it also works to close the racial wealth gap, which we know significantly affects Black men in particular.
I am proud to be the only candidate in this race in a couple different areas when it comes to how urgent the housing crisis is and how housing should be closing the racial wealth gap and uplifting and creating opportunities for Black and brown communities and Black and brown men. I have stated really specifically a strong commitment that this once in a generation opportunity we have with the federal funds coming down to recover from the pandemic has to center housing as the foundation for that. So I'm the only one who's put forward clear numbers. At least $200 million of this federal relief package will go to housing stability. And that's in a couple different areas. I've put forward a larger plan, but the sort of summary is that, one, we should be creating more affordable housing, making it possible for affordable housing that, when I say affordable housing, I mean actually affordable housing for our residents, not the general terms that actually are at much higher, area median income percentages that don't reflect what our residents can actually afford. So we need to be creating more of it. We need to be changing our zoning code to speed up when 100% affordable projects are proposed. And we need to be ensuring that we are working to make sure that every private development also feeds into the resources that are available for affordable housing. We have to boost home ownership, right? We all know the racial wealth gap numbers, and that the biggest part of that gap is disparities between the percentage of Black families who own homes and white families and other communities. And so the more that we can increase assistance through programs like the One Plus Boston program, other down payment assistance programs, really expand subsidies and make sure that we are increasing I very much support increasing the total cap on how much down payment assistance can go to one family, because it's just the reality of the size of down payment that you need in Boston has been growing far more than what we've been putting into that pot. And then we need to innovate as well. So I have proposed doing a city level home ownership voucher. So we're not just providing vouchers around rentals, but really pushing for families to build equity and to generate the wealth to pass on to the next generation. I'm also the only candidate in this race who has said that it's not enough just to start the process of building more affordable housing and helping men of color and families of color get into these homes. We have to prevent families of color, particularly Black and brown communities, from being pushed out of our city in the meantime, right? The displacement crisis is making every other issue more intense, pushing racial injustices across every side. And so we need rent stabilization. We need for the city of Boston to demand every tool in the toolbox for rent control, for the ability to provide protections for our residents. In every other policy area, city government can have a specific conversation about how we do everything we can to help our residents. This is one place where it's been kind of arbitrarily taken out of our control by the state and by the ballot question a couple decades ago. We can't be afraid to fight for the community that we deserve and for what our communities need. And so this is, between advocacy for rent stabilization and stopping displacement, between advocacy for transportation to be affordable, accessible, free. This directly centers Black and brown men and Black and brown families in making sure that we keep our residents in our neighborhoods today and stop displacement.
Appreciate the question. Affordable housing is really important, and Boston continues to be a city that is too expensive for our families, too expensive for most of us. And so I spent many of my professional life at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, making sure, in fact, that we built affordable housing in our neighborhood so as we improved our neighborhood, that we can stay in our neighborhood, develop and improve where we live, and make sure that we don't displace those who live there. The efforts from coming out of the community and led by the community called for more, not just affordable housing, but particularly home ownership. The work that we did was to make sure that the recruitment, the marketing, and the classes on affordable housing and getting people prepared was done locally. So we tried to make sure that we were helping people on the ground and informing people on the ground. So when the houses became available, that they can be part of the lottery, that they can be part of the process. We need to continue to do that with our brothers out there and make sure that they're informed, that they know what's going on, and that they are there to take the classes, get the certificates, and be part of the lottery process. It's something that I've done at DSNI, something that I've done personally as I call people about what's out there and what opportunities are, and something that I would do as mayor and continue to do to make sure that's available.
First and foremost, housing in the city of Boston is too expensive. And when we think about the work to create these opportunities around affordability, whether it's on the rental market or in the ownership market, and we have to continue to talk about the ownership market throughout all of our conversations around the crisis of housing in the city and the improved access to affordability when it comes to housing across the city. But we have to recognize and appreciate the important role that housing and housing stability plays on the individual and on the family and on the community. So for me, and when we think about very specifically working with Black men in our communities, that we are creating those and working in partnership with Black men on creating those direct pathways to ownership opportunities. If you are paying rent in this city, you can afford a mortgage in this city, but it is those support services to get to that point. It's access to capital for down payment assistance. It's access to financial literacy courses to be able to manage one's personal books. It's access to the first-time homebuyer programs that our city's residents need to get done. And that's where the city can play such an important and critical role in supporting an individual. Because it's not the monthly bill that's due that becomes the problem. It's those extra pieces where the city can very actively engage and step in, especially to help our Black men across our neighborhoods engage in home ownership. I think many of you know, I've been hosting some of the at-large counselors at my home to introduce them to my network. It was, 2013, I first ran at large. There were 19 candidates in the race. And, it's hard to meet the people of Boston, especially when there are so many people running for office. And it is as much as it's a small city, it's a big city. And the conversations and the questions that have been asked of the candidates has been fascinating and certainly very enlightening to me. And I have a friend of mine, a Black man, asked the question specific of all of the candidates because he's attended all of the sessions. He says, I've been here for several generations. My family are, we talk about having deep roots. His family has deep roots here in the city of Boston, and yet they haven't had an opportunity for ownership. When we think about the systemic racism that exists within the housing structure, we think of our banking system, we think about our mortgage system, we think about our real estate market. And he said, he goes, for generations, we've been here and I have nothing to show for it. How ownership creates a different relationship with one's community. And we think about the historical roots of the discussion around ownership. When you own, you have certain privileges, certain rights, certain power. And when you don't have access to those opportunities. And we have to create certainly a balance between those two things, but create ownership opportunities across our city for all of our residents, but in particular, our Black men, as they look to support themselves, their families, their communities. It's an important component, one that I'm committed to.